pride is the source of all our insecurities. I think something that's really incredible about our walk with God is that as you journey with God, you get to see the wisdom, the true wisdom, just a glimpse of the wisdom in all of His commandments. And when He tells us, these are sins you should not be doing. The world looks at it as like, oh, God is just, He's the sheriff who just wants to take away all your fun. But as you walk with God, you get to see just a glimpse of the wisdom in everything He says when He's like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, right? So lust, again, that's something I think if you've been walking long enough with God, you'll know why, lust is a sin. Like it wreaks so much havoc. There's anger. Jesus said, if you've been angry with a brother in your heart, you've basically committed murder, right? Because it's a surface manifestation of like not caring about that person's life, and then murder is like the ultimate like disregard for someone's life, right? All these things, right? They're all these like sins we've been told not to do. But pride is another one where you get to see just where the pitfall of pride comes, and yeah, pride is the source of all our insecurities, right? And pride, it raises its ugly head over and over and over again in all the stories in the Bible. I mean, it raised its ugly head at the start, bro. Like it was, okay, Satan's sin, right? His sin was the sin of pride, right? He was proud. He wanted to be like God, right? He wasn't happy enough with where he was. He wanted to be like God. He wanted to take God's throne, or to no, not take God's throne. He wanted to sit on a throne above God, right? We know about like Solomon. He asked for wisdom and all this stuff, but like in the end, it was pride that led to his downfall because he wouldn't listen to God. And I'm gonna get into this now, but it is part of like it's the main reason we struggle in our walk with God. Like people like you and me who really want to get to know God, we're searching for the light, but we're struggling quite a bit, right? It is literally pride because we know, Jesus is God, right? He died and He rose again. There's evidence for the resurrection. Like many like 500 eyewitnesses, and we believe every word He says is true. And when he says seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added to you. Take up your cross, which again we'll get into later. When He says all these things, right? We believe in it and we want to do it, but we struggle to do it. And the only reason we struggle to do that is because of pride, because we're humans, right? If we had like the level of faith that Jesus requires from us, and Jesus did say faith of a mustard seed, right? It's just about humbling ourselves and completely surrendering to God. Taking up your own cross means, laying down yourself, and like I'll get into this later. It means laying down yourself, and just putting forward like the true self that God has created in you, like the true self that has been created in God's image, right? It means laying down what you want and listening to what God is saying, submitting to God, right? And we struggle with that as humans because we're very prideful. We walk around as if we know more than God. That's why we struggle when where all our hurt and disappointment comes from, because we want something and God says no, and now we're angry at Him. Yeah, we're like angry at God for like not giving us what we want, or for doing things not in the way that we wanted them, right? That's where pride comes from. But the original sin, right, in the garden, right, the Garden of Eden, right, we had a perfect garden. Like it was a paradise, right? It was perfect. No hurt, like no sin, like no shame, nothing. It was perfect. No insecurities. You can rest on there were no insecurities, right? And then what happened, right? God was like, do not eat of this fruit or whatever. Eat of the tree, and then we ate of the tree. Because why? We were prideful, right? We basically said, "Screw you, God. I want to know things for myself. I think I know a little. I think I know a little bit better than you. I think I know what I want more than you know what I want, right?" So that's why we went and we ate of the fruit. And I say we because like we are like Adam and Eve. Like people look at Adam and Eve and it's like, oh, they screwed us over. But if we were all in that garden, we all would have done the same thing, because that's just how we are as humans. We do it every day now, right? Like we do it every day now. That's why we struggle so much in our relationship with God. But that was the sin of pride, and from that, all this hurt, pain, insecurities, and everything that come in this world came from that, right? Because before we had the sin of pride, we lived in a perfect garden that had no hurt, no pain, right? Nothing, and nothing bad like that. And you can rest assured, I think we can all agree that insecurities they do not come from God. God does not create the things to harm us, right? He's not here to harm us, right? He's given us all these good things, right? But because of our pride, right? I saw this one thing. I saw it yesterday. It was so good, right? It was that like Satan feasts on the things that we hold on to instead of letting go to God, right? The things we're supposed to give up, And Jesus says, take up your cross. The things we're supposed to give up to God, right? But we don't, and we kind of hold on to them, right? Like your insecurities, right? Your insecurities is because you're holding on to just something that you think will bring value, that makes you valuable. And Jesus is like, no, let go, let go. That's not what makes you valuable. What makes you valuable is that I've created you in my image, right? But we hold on to these things, and Satan thrives on that. He feasts on that, and that's where the insecurities come from, right? Insecurities do not come from God, right? They come from us holding on to things from our pride, and then Satan just absolutely wreaking havoc on our minds with that. But another thing I want to speak about is taking up your cross, right? So when Jesus says take up your cross, it's not some easy thing, because people think Christianity is just as easy, like, oh, just say you believe in Jesus and you get into heaven. No. No. You could, first of all, it's not just saying. I spoke about this in the last video. You can go watch that on like what sincere faith is, but you need to have true faith. And part of having true faith, right, is again taking up your own cross. Jesus said, take up your own cross, and that is the most difficult person us as human beings can do, especially because we're prideful. And again, just to go back on the pride thing, God said, no, well, it's in the Bible where it says that God opposes the proud and he exalts the humble, right? Again, it's just about like laying that down. Taking up your own cross is an act of humility, right? And this was explained to me perfectly by Cliff. Like Cliff Connectley, I love that guy. Like he's so biblically sound. But he said this thing. So taking up your cross, what does that mean, right? Taking up your cross means laying down your false self, right? Your false self that you've created in your mind, where you say, I'm valuable because of X. I'm valuable because, I make a lot of money. I'm valuable because I have a good body. Or I'm valuable because I'm pretty. Or I'm valuable because, I've done these good things. Like all these things you say, I'm valuable because of all of these things, right? It's laying down that person, laying down that's a false self, right? And this is, again, why it's important to why Jesus said, if you're not like a little kid, you will not get into the kingdom of heaven. Think about it. Little children, right? Like they have nothing to offer. Like they're kids. They can't say I'm valuable because I make a lot of money. They can't say I'm valuable because I've done all these good things. They can't say I'm valuable because I'm popular or I'm pretty or whatever. They can't say any of that. Like they're just kids. They just are. Kids are just valuable because they're kids, right? Because they just are. Like they're inherently valuable because they're created in God's image, right? That's why Jesus is saying, if you're not like a little kid, you want to get into the kingdom of heaven, because kids don't think they're valuable because of things they have or things they've done, right? They're just kids, right? They know they have nothing to offer and they're humble like that, and that's how we should be, right? The false self we have created is, I'm valuable because of this, and that. But that's not what Jesus said. That's not in the Bible, right? You're wonderful. You're not wonderful. You are valuable because you're created in God's image. So taking up your cross means laying down that false self that you've created for yourself, where you say, I'm valuable because of X, Y, and Z, right? And putting forward the true self, the true self that has been created in God's image, fearfully and wonderfully made, right? Made in God's image, right? That exhibits, the characteristics of, justice, love, mercy, all these wonderful things, servanthood, these things that Jesus came and said we should do, right? That's what taking up your cross is. Laying down your false self that you've created and putting forward, the true self that has been created in God's image. And I think this ties in very well with understanding what success in God's kingdom is. Success in God's kingdom, okay, it's definitely, not, how popular are you, how good looking are you, how much money have you made. It's definitely not that. But another thing that we also fall into as Christians, which we might be tempted to fall into, success in God's kingdom, again, is also not how well have you kept the commandments, right? It's obedience, right? It's obedience to Jesus Christ. Like that's what success in the kingdom is. And obedience doesn't. Now, the reason I paused there was because I kind of thought, I was like, wait, success in God's kingdom. I know success in God's kingdom is not keeping the commandments, but I know the next thing I was going to say is that success in God's kingdom is obedience to Him, right? Now, the difference in that is that how well you keep the commandments, again, it's just an impossible thing. Like you're literally aiming. The only person who's ever kept God's commandments is God Himself, as Jesus Christ. If you're relating on how successful you are, be like, oh, in my life, if I was to rate myself on how well I kept the commandments, it's I did pretty well. I would give myself a 9 out of 10, a 90% success rate. I'm pretty good. I'm successful in God's kingdom. No, right? Success in God's kingdom is obedience. That means where your heart is. Jesus came to preach about where your heart is. Your obedience means that, when Jesus came, that passage again, I keep going to it. The one where this guy comes to Jesus and he's like, good teacher, what does one have to do to get into the kingdom of heaven or something like that? And then Jesus is like, why do you call me good? Only God is good. And again, if you're a little confused at that statement made by Jesus, I was also very confused about it. Basically, this guy's coming through the lens of, oh, humans can be good. Like a human can be good, and Jesus is like, no, only God can be good. And he's basically saying, you realize that you're calling me God, right? Like he's kind of being rhetorical with it. But anyways, he says, why do you call me good? Only God is good, right? Tell me, how well would you say you've kept the commandments really well? And then the guy's like, yeah, I've done pretty well. And then Jesus is like, then sell all your riches and distribute them to the poor. And the guy's like, yeah, I don't know about that one, right? Like, because it's hard. Like he's holding on to these things, and Jesus is just pointing out, you're a human. You're never going to keep all the commandments, especially because you're clearly holding onto your riches, right? Like you're holding on to something, and obedience, right? The distinction between how well you follow the commandments, which is not a barometer for success in God's kingdom, because we all fall short of it, right? The reason that's different to obedience is that the obedience in that case, right? That guy has come in and basically said, I'm good because I've kept the commandments pretty well. And then Jesus is like, sell all your possessions and distribute them to the poor. And he's like, nah, right? Obedience is understanding that Jesus is God, right? Understanding that God is God. And when he says something, you do it. Like that's what obedience is. Obedience is Abraham. Again, Abraham did not keep all the commandments, right? I mean, he's human. No one has kept all the commandments except for Jesus. Abraham did not keep all the commandments, but when God said, go and sacrifice Isaac, it says in the Bible, the next day, literally the next day, he was on his way, right? That's obedience. Obedience is knowing that Jesus is his Lord, right? He's above you. And when he says you must do something, you lay it down and you do it. That's what obedience is. And that's what success in God's kingdom is. How obedient, and I think another word we can use for obedience is faithfulness. How faithful are you? How willing are you, like when God says do something, to just go and do it, right? And again, this does not mean you keep the commandments perfectly, because we're not going to keep the commandments perfectly, but it's about your heart and knowing that when Jesus says something, you listen to it and you lay it down and you do it immediately, right? Because his ways are above your ways. That's what success in God's kingdom is, not all these other things we've created for ourselves, being like, I'm valuable because of this and that. God did not create insecurities, right? All these insecurities we have come from ourselves, right? Our false selves that we've created, from our pride that we have. That's where our insecurities come from. And if we just listen to what Jesus said, where we take up our own cross and we crucify our old selves, right? We won't have those insecurities. We're not supposed to be having them, right? If think about it, right? Do you think Jesus had insecurities, bro? I mean, okay, maybe that's a bit of an unfair comparison because Jesus is God, right? But like, genuinely though, you think someone that's following Jesus like wholeheartedly is going to have insecurities? We'll have some level of insecurities, but do you think you're going to be riddled with insecurities the way our generation is? Absolutely not. Like, if your barometer for success is how obedient and how faithful you are to God, right? And not, how much money do you make, how handsome are you, how popular are you, or whatever. If your barometer for success is your obedience and faithfulness to God, how can you be insecure? Or how can you? And also, again, this false self we create is like, I'm better than that person because I do this better than them, right? That's not biblical at all. We're not supposed to be comparing ourselves to other people at all, right? We're simply just supposed to be looking up to Jesus and being like, I'm so far short of you. Like, I could never even dream of being anywhere close to you. But because of your grace, that you've given me, I get to go and be in heaven with you. So I will listen to everything you say. If you have that kind of mentality, where your insecurity is going to come from? Like, literally no one can say anything to you that will make you insecure. You can't draw insecurities from anything. But yeah, you guys let me know what you think of the topic in the comment section below. It is a bit of it's a shifty one. But yeah, make sure you subscribe to join the community, and until next time, see you guys.